Inspector Alistair Finch found himself once again in a room draped in velvet and desperation, a typical Thursday night in the fog-drenched heart of Westminster. He disliked mediums, spiritualists, and anyone who profited from grief, viewing them as simple criminals dressed in silk. His latest case, however, involved a device that was anything but simple, suggesting a mechanical menace beneath the spiritual veneer. Lord Harrington's ornate parlor, now the setting for the bizarre affair, smelled heavily of stale incense and something distinctly oily, a scent that clung to Finch's wool coat like a shroud. The deceased lord had passed a fortnight prior, and his family, driven by questions of a missing codicil to his will, had summoned the famous Madame Serafina. At the center of the room sat the apparatus, the etheric communicator. It was a towering monstrosity of polished mahogany, intricate brass tubing, and bubbling glass vials, powered by a small, hissing steam engine nestled discreetly behind a tasseled screen. Finch circled the machine slowly, his gloved fingers tracing the cold surface of a heavy gauge that measured etheric resonance. To him, it measured only the gullibility of the clientele and the complexity of the fraud. "Remarkable, isn't it, Inspector?" a reedy voice intruded. It belonged to Elias Croft, the eccentric inventor who had designed the device and now nervously adjusted a needle valve on the steam feed. Croft was a man composed entirely of nervous angles and smudged graphite, clearly more comfortable with gears than with high society. He wore thick spectacles that magnified his wide, anxious eyes. "Remarkable," Finch agreed dryly, in its sheer complexity. "Most charlatans rely on cheap bells and whistles. Mr. Croft, you seem to have built an entire locomotive to ring the bell." Croft bristled, pulling a velvet cloth tighter over the engine. "This is not charlatanry, sir. This machine processes the ambient psychic residue, using stabilized steam pressure to generate a sonic bridge to the other side." Finch simply adjusted his own spectacles, a habit that allowed him a moment to observe the room without appearing to stare. The 5 attendees were all Harrington's heirs, their faces masks of performative sorrow, barely concealing their avarice. There was Lady Beatrice, the eldest daughter, rigid with ambition, her nervous solicitor, Mr. Ponsonby, and the 3 younger shiftless nephews, all equally desperate for the lord's substantial fortune. Madame Serafina entered, and the atmosphere shifted from tense to theatrical. She was statuesque, clad in deep violet velvet, her face pale beneath a heavy application of rouge, and her hair a dramatic black pile. She did not walk, she glided, stopping by the communicator, placing a delicate, mechanical hand-done masterpiece of articulated silver on the brass casing. It was an aesthetic touch, but the subtle rhythmic tick of the mechanism within her wrist was audible. The spirits demand silence and patience. Her voice was a low, resonant alto that seemed artificially deepened. She eyed Finch, noting his uniformed presence with a flicker of annoyance. Finch was only present by special royal decree, as the Harrington estate held significant national secrets involving naval patents, the fact that elevated this séance from simple fraud to a matter of national security. "I shall observe, madame," Finch assured her, moving to a position near the heavy oak fireplace, where he could watch the entire proceedings, particularly the steam engine behind the screen. Serafina extinguished the gaslights, plunging the parlor into near darkness, illuminated only by a single pulsing ruby lamp on the communicator's console. The air grew immediately cooler. Croft, sweat beading on his brow, shoveled a few lumps of specially treated anthracite coal into the small boiler, increasing the pressure with a loud, rhythmic thump-thump. The communicator came to life. Tiny steam whistles began to chirp an unsettling, high-pitched tune, and the brass tubes glowed faintly with internal heat. A large, complex gear assembly on the front of the machine designed, Finch suspected, purely for distraction, began to rotate with hypnotic precision. Seraphine's eyes fluttered shut, and she began her incantation, her voice weaving a hypnotic tapestry of nonsense syllables and archaic phrasing. The air grew thick with the heavy scent of burning oil. Finch noted a small, almost imperceptible vibration running through the wooden floorboards, originating not from the visible engine, but from the wall directly behind Croft. He mentally catalogued the anachronism. A steam engine of that size should not require the addition of external power, yet the rhythmic vibration suggested a discrete secondary pump was active. The needle on the etheric resonance gauge began to jump wildly, twitching back and forth in frantic, artificial spikes. The bubbling glass vials turned an unsettling emerald green. Lord Harrington is present, Serafina whispered, her voice strained. He is attempting to speak through the metallic bridge. Lady Beatrice leaned forward, her face a pale oval in the dim light. Father, is the codicil, where is it? The one concerning the dockyards? A low, distorted hum emanated from a conical brass trumpet affixed to the communicator. It was a sound engineered to suggest a disembodied voice attempting to coalesce. The humming resolved itself into two words, delivered in a slow, agonizing groan. The clock, ... beneath. ... The sound was instantly followed by a violent burst of steam from a relief valve near the floor, making everyone jump back, scattering dust in momentary panic. Croft quickly adjusted the pressure, muttering about unstable spiritual feedback. But Finch watched the engineer's hands, noting they moved with mechanical familiarity, not superstitious dread. The clock? The grandfather clock in the library? Duh, cried one of the nephews, scrambling to his feet, eager to check the new location. Wait, Finch commanded, his voice cutting through the hysteria. He raised a hand, stopping the frantic movement toward the door. The inspector had focused not on the words, but on the method of their delivery. The low guttural quality was clearly a distortion filter, easily achievable with a simple acoustic horn. Moreover, the brief mention of the dockyards suggested prior knowledge of the family's specific anxieties information, easily gleaned from parlor talk and domestic staff. But the secondary vibration was the key. Finch approached the wall where the engine was screened off, his eyes scanning for the source of the subtle mechanical menace. He knelt, pretending to adjust his shoelace, but instead ran his fingers along the wainscoting where the rhythmic thump-thump was strongest. He found it, a minute seam in the paneling barely visible, suggesting a hidden access point or a discreet external pipe. Finch stood, returning to the center of the room. Serafina was now describing Lord Harrington's painful transition, giving Croft a few precious minutes to make further adjustments. Madame Finch interrupted, his tone polite but unyielding. Perhaps the spirit could clarify. Which clock? The one in the library, or the smaller, automated travel clock Lord Harrington favored? Serafina hesitated, her hands flexing on the brass casing of the communicator. The larger clock, Inspector. The one with the heavy pendulum. I see, Finch responded smoothly. Shame. The Lord's favorite travel clock, which is currently on his study mantel, contains a delicate miniature spring-driven mechanism. A detail the spirits might have overlooked, he added pointedly, watching Croft's hands freeze mid-adjustment behind the screen. The true crisis of character was not spiritual, but mechanical. The communicator was running too perfectly, its steam flow to controlled, its sound distortion to clean. Serafina realized she had been cornered by a minute, technical detail only known to the family. She quickly changed tactics, attempting to create chaos. With a dramatic shriek, she slammed her mechanical hand onto the communicator's main console. The act was meant to look like spiritual seizure. Instead, the sudden impact fractured one of the glass vials containing the shimmering emerald liquid. The fluid splashed onto the hot brass tubing. The resulting plume of acrid, brightly colored smoke was instantaneous, smelling strongly of sulfur and burning potassium, and filling the room with a chaotic green haze. The spirit is angry. The bridge is unstable, Serafina cried, using the distraction to quickly try and pocket a small funnel-shaped listening device that rested near her palm. Finch moved with the speed of a frustrated bureaucrat. He sidestepped Lady Beatrice, who was already running for the door, and reached the screen covering the steam engine. He ripped the heavy velvet cloth away. The sight was even more complex than he had imagined, revealing not just a boiler, but a system of finely tuned pneumatics. The device wasn't a spiritual conduit. It was an incredibly elaborate steam-powered recording and playback system designed to project pre-recorded distorted whispers. Croft had built a complex phonograph into the machine, using the pulsing steam pressure and the hidden secondary pump to regulate the speed of the wax cylinder, masking the mechanical telltale sounds. Finch pointed toward the floor. Mr. Croft, lift that rug. Croft, defeated, slowly obeyed. Beneath the thick Persian carpet lay a circular brass plate, the size of a tea tray heavily bolted to the floorboards. That, Finch declared, is the access panel for the hidden speaking tube and the secondary pneumatic pump that supplies the actual necessary pressure. Croft's face sagged. It was the only way to stabilize the signal and prevent the distortion from betraying the cylinder's rotations, he mumbled. Technical pride overriding his criminal shame. The moral of the story emerged clearly. Technology was not inherently evil, but its complexity made it the perfect camouflage for simple, old-fashioned greed. Serafina, realizing the game was over, dropped her funnel device and attempted to melt back into the shadows, but Finch blocked her exit. "Madame, your talents are wasted on this grand stage. A simpler magnet and a dark curtain would have sufficed for most. But you and Mr. Croft aimed higher, didn't you?" Their motive was not just the codicil. The true mechanical menace was revealed when Finch opened a false bottom in the etheric communicator's base. Inside, nestled on a bed of velvet, lay a series of micro-etched brass plates, prototypes for an advanced naval gyrostabilizer, the very patents Lord Harrington was protecting. The séance wasn't about the will. It was about using the chaos of the spiritual contact to smuggle out the plates, replacing them with useless blanks. Lady Beatrice's solicitor Ponsonby, who had been conspicuously silent, finally spoke, his voice high-pitched with panic. The agreement was only for the will's contents, not the patents. Finch turned a cold eye on the solicitor. "It appears, Mr. Ponsonby, that the only honest communication tonight was the sound of a highly sophisticated mechanical fraud. The great Victorian intrigue was now fully exposed. The medium, the inventor, and the solicitor were a team, hired by a foreign power eager to steal British naval supremacy. The three nephews, forgotten in the corner, were genuinely innocent, their disappointment at the lack of a quick fortune overshadowed by their bewilderment." Finch called for the constables he had wisely positioned outside, ensuring the perimeter was secured before the theatrics began. Serafina sneered, her composure returning as she faced inevitable arrest. "A clever trick, Inspector. But you only caught us because you assumed it was a simple lie." "I caught you," Madame Finch corrected her, "because you introduced engineering into mysticism. And engineering, unlike spiritualism, must obey the laws of physics, which are easier to test than the will of the deceased." Croft began sobbing, lamenting the destruction of his beautiful creation. "My engine. It was perfect. The variable compression was revolutionary." Finch allowed him a moment of grief. The inventor's true crime was the corruption of his talent, dedicating mechanical genius to the service of deceit. The constable secured Serafina, her intricate silver hand clicking against the iron handcuffs with a chilling sound. Ponsonby, the solicitor, was apprehended next, clutching his briefcase as if it contained his lost morality. Finch took possession of the micro-etched plates, handling them with the care due to state secrets. The parlor, once a sight of solemn mourning, was now just a cluttered crime scene, smelling of ozone, steam, and human betrayal.
Ow.
As the room emptied and the great etheric communicator slowly cooled, its brass exterior losing its faint glow, Finch performed a final inspection. He gently touched the spinning gear assembly. It still turned, albeit slowly, driven only by residual steam pressure, a monument to misguided ingenuity. The subtle mechanical menace had been neutralized, but the underlying Victorian intrigue, the constant battle between appearance and reality, gaslight and shadow remained. The inspector often reflected that the most complex deceptions of the era were not supernatural, but those relying on pulleys, pistons, and compressed air. He understood the appeal of the illusion, the desperate human need to connect with what is lost. But he also understood the cynical calculation of those who manufactured hope for a price. Finch picked up his hat and coat, feeling the chill of the now silent room penetrate his bones. The case was closed, the patents secured. Yet, the victory felt hollow, simply proving that even in the age of marvels, the human heart remains stubbornly predictable. Croft's complex mechanism had provided a sonic bridge, but it had ultimately revealed only the familiar, unyielding frequency of greed. The city outside, shrouded in its perpetual sepia-toned fog, awaited his return, ready to present its next conundrum of technology and treachery. Finch stepped out, signaling to his subordinate to wrap the communicator as evidence. The faint rhythmic tick of Madame Seraphine's clockwork wrist, now silent and confiscated, echoed in his mind. He considered the intricate gear ratios, the flawless engineering dedicated to a lie, a testament to the era's strange blend of advancement and delusion. The true moral focus of the night was the inherent danger of believing too easily in complex mechanisms or dramatic performances. Trust required skepticism, And in the gaslight noir world, skepticism was the only reliable shield. The inspector took a deep, clean breath of the night air, grateful for the cold, simple reality of the fog. The steam-powered Séance had promised a ghostly contact but delivered a cold, hard lesson in mechanical cynicism. Finch drove away, leaving the silent, ornate mansion behind, ready for the bureaucratic cleanup that always followed high drama. His commitment to unmasking fraud, no matter how technologically advanced, was his own personal, rigid moral code. The intricate plots of Victorian London, blending technology and greed, would undoubtedly continue. If you were captivated by this tale of gaslight noir and subtle mechanical menace, let us know. Comment, like, share, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio for more Victorian intrigue.